Hey everyone, this is The Baptist
And the Buddhist
with Mark,
and Brian.
and we are on episode 2. If you listened
Episode.
last episode, I don't want to say week because I don't know our intervals yet, but but if you listened last week, we kind of introduced ourselves. So if you don't know who we are, go back and listen to that first. If you want to get weirded out, just go ahead and keep listening.
They might not even, they might just skip the very long intro episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good information, pertinent information, maybe.
There is.
Or maybe
Yeah.
they'll skip it to these later episodes so they can understand what we were talking about in the first episode.
Yeah, when you finish this whole series, go back again. It's a whole new world, whole new
Exactly.
understanding.
Yep. Okay, so I think last time we left off kind of answering some questions about our religions and our beliefs, and we left off with kind of a list of questions we're asking ourselves or answering, and the next one was kind of about faith, and I think that's the theme of this episode is going to be faith, and we're just going to leave it at that because that's very general. And we're kind of keeping these things general, um,
Yeah.
kind of open-ended questions to get ourselves to answer it in the most relevant way we can, according to our point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Keeping it general so that we can dig up what we respectively would dig up.
Yeah, exactly.
So today
Okay,
we're today we're talking about faith.
faith. Yep,
What
whatever
is
that means.
Yeah, I know. That's such a broad term nowadays.
It
And I
really
think
is.
I think like the popular idea conception of faith like in a very generic world international sense, I guess. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is like, I guess, would you agree that most people, when they hear the word faith, would probably think of like blind faith or something?
Yeah, yeah, and I kind of have something to say about that, especially in the realm of Christianity too, because what a lot of people think, even outside of religion, they tend to put a specific definition on faith. And I don't know if like that's one of those words that can get lost in translation between two people, let alone two religions. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's
It's
such a broad term and lots of
yeah.
applications. It's kind of like my name. There's a lot of applications for the word Mark.
There's
I looked the word mark up in the dictionary once, and there were a ton of definitions. I'm like, I didn't even know there were this many definitions for one word, and I'm convinced it's the one word in the dictionary with the most definitions.
See, Brian's not even in the dictionary, so last
Maybe
I
someday.
checked though, so I don't know. Maybe there is a non-proper noun Brian.
Right. Maybe.
I think it's Irish for strong or something.
I'm pretty sure my name comes from like a derivative of Mars, like the god of
Oh.
war. So it there's a lot of different uh, definitions, and I've heard some definitions that I've never been able to confirm. I'm like, where in the world did you get that?
For the name Mark?
Yeah, yep.
Wow.
It's like it means like weak or something like that. I'm like, I've never heard that before in my life, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. And I
Yeah,
heard it
that's
from a one of my religious leaders, I should say. I'm just gonna broadly use that term.
Wait,
Relig-
so he said it means weak?
yeah, I'm like, I don't know
That's
where you're getting that.
that would be a very strange coincidence.
That would be because
Yeah.
I'm strong. No, I'm kidding. But like the god of war or like warlike is some definitions of the word of the name Mark, and weak is like complete opposite of that. So I don't know where they're
Unless
getting
there's like a different etymological origin from a different language or something that uses that word for weak, but that would be a huge coincidence, I would think.
it. Yeah, I would say so too. Hmm.
Yeah.
So faith.
Faith.
So
Let's
I
get
know
back on track.
initially the question you sent me a little behind the scenes was how would you personally define faith or relate to your faith? And I didn't really know how to specifically answer that question.
The whole thing or
That whole thing.
the whole that question
That
or like
question, like I'm like, how would I answer this? But I think like my what I have, the way I want to answer that might not be exactly how it's supposed to be answered. But again, those questions are pretty open
so
ended. So
yeah, like how would you define faith versus like so do you have were you having issues with that one or the relate to your faith?
I think relate to your faith was like the one that I'm like, what does that mean exactly?
Okay. I
And
think I can't remember exactly when I wrote those questions what I was like aiming for, but I think uh that like how do you define faith is just what it sounds like. How do you relate to your faith? I think was more like how do you relate to your faith tradition or religion?
okay,
So
I
so
still
it
don't know how to answer that one, but
yeah, yeah,
but
me.
let's. Uh, do you want to start or I can start? I don't really care which way.
I
With
think the Baptist and the
sure,
Buddhist we go
yeah,
in order.
yeah, okay, yeah, definitely. So when I thought of faith, like what is faith? Like I sat down, I'm like, how do I define faith? And I thought about the other way people define faith. Some people might say it just means a belief or maybe even a religion or just like how much you believe in something or how much you trust something. And I could see I tend to agree with most of those. Um, I think in Christianity in general, like faith, like what is faith? It's like you have faith. Like you say like you have faith in something. Um, Usually in Christianity, it's like you have like you're saved by your faith in what Jesus did for the sins of the world. I tend to slightly agree with that, but slightly not based on what I've studied in the Bible. So with with faith, I'll start in like what the Old Testament says about it a little bit, just a little bit. I'm not going to pull out a ton of scripture because I can, but I won't because that would just be too that's for another podcast. And I might actually integrate this into maybe a future podcast that I want to start producing. Hopefully, it's going to be going back on my roots in the realm of Bible contradictions
Mm.
and Christianity contradictions, I guess.
We'll
Um,
we'll have an episode on that too.
oh
So
yeah, definitely. And I think this kind of addresses one, but when the Bible talks about faith, this is how I see it from the Bible point of view is that it's having faith or being faithful is like being able to make a promise and keep it. That's kind of how I see it.
mm,
Um, in the Old Testament, and this is going to kind of go back to what I talked about last time about like how God deals with man dispensationally. So, like in the Old Testament, God was dealing with man through the nation of Israel. I mean, before that, it was through specific people groups, maybe, or a certain person, or certain commandments, if you will. But largely, He was working through the nation of Israel. By yeah,
so just wrapping my head around this idea is God using Israel and like the other things you were talking about, kind of like channels through which to properly communicate with people, like with mankind
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah, and I'd hate to get too much in specifics because that's for another episode probably. But like the way God was dealing with mankind in general back then, really up until um, Israel rejected him at the stoning of Stephen in the book of Acts. So that was like after Jesus was crucified and everything. God was dealing with humankind through the nation of Israel, and they were to be a beacon on a hill, if you will, a light on a hill to bring the nations to God through the nation of Israel. They had I mean, if you look at how that was done, the Old Testament, a lot of people say the Old Testament has a way different like feeling and color than the New Testament. And that's because of the way he was dealing with mankind back then. In the Old Testament, faith was charged to man. Like so if you wanted to be quote unquote like right with God, you had to be faithful. You had to have the faith. Like Habakkuk 2 says, like a just man is saved by his faith. And even on Jesus's in Jesus's earthly ministry, he talks about how like he might be talking to someone specific, maybe like performing a miracle or something. He'll say, "Your faith has saved you," or like, "But like your faith has healed you," because they come to him in faith, saying like, "You are the Messiah. We believe you are the Christ," and by their action coming to him, that's their faith. In the Old Testament, like throughout that whole time period, they had to basically they had to follow the commandments. Obviously, they couldn't keep the 10 Commandments, so they had to follow all the Jewish law with sacrifices and different ways to deal with different things. And by doing that, that shows that they are faithful to Him. And that was their faith. They had to take action. Turn that around into this age, and I'll kind of give you a little transition because of your questions were great about like God using Israel as a tool for like to like as a channel to reach mankind basically. Through the apostle Paul, what God did was he revealed completely new stuff, completely new um I don't want to say commandments, but a completely new way to deal with man, and that was through his full dispensing of grace. And instead of mankind having to do things, uh, Jesus showed Paul that he did the things for us. Like he died on the cross for our sins, for reconciliation. They didn't really know about that before he revealed that to Paul. So when there's a famous verse in Christianity, Ephesians 2:8 and 9, it's for by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourself, it is the gift of God, lest any man should boast. I may have misquoted that a little bit, but the important part was like, for by grace are you saved through faith. The Old Testament uh, says specifically that they're saved through faith or by faith. Let me make sure I'm saying that right, because Ephesians 2:8 and 9, for by grace are you saved through faith, but they were saved by faith. Like it's very specific like
Hmm.
wording. um and the question is, whose faith by grace are we saved in this day and age? I think it's in First Timothy 1. Let me pull that up real quick so I don't misquote it. First Timothy 1, I think it was 4. First Timothy 1:14. Let's see here. And the grace of our Lord was exceeding abundant with faith and love, which is in Christ Jesus. And let me go back to Ephesians 2:8 and 9. The gift of God it talks about is the being saved by grace through faith. And really, in general, what I'm trying to get at is we are saved by the faith of Jesus, not our own faith. So like he was faithful, he's going to keep his promises that he made, and it's by his grace that he is presenting his faith to us so that we can be saved, and not relying on our own faith. There's a song that says like my faith is like sinking sands, changed by every wave. Like man alone in God's grace isn't faithful to save ourselves or to rely on ourselves. So with faith, with the faith of Christ, we are saved through his grace, and it's not of ourselves. And I don't want to go too much on the topic of salvation because of that's going to be another episode probably.
Oh yeah.
But with the salvation from sin, like instead of us having to do something to prove our faith, Jesus did something to prove his faith, and we just have to rely on that. We basically have to stop doing something to rely on our faith. We have to stop relying. We just trust is a good word that the Bible uses, because that paints a picture of uh, bearing a weight, bearing a load, instead of carrying it yourself. So I hope I did that some justice.
I I think so. So this doesn't directly, I don't know if it directly relates to, well, I have a few questions.
Sure.
So to clarify, it's through Jesus's faith and not mankind's faith.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And another kind of unrelated question, because like you were describing like the Old Testament and how like they, in order to, I don't know, prove their faith in a sense, they had to like do these actions like sacrifices and stuff.
Hmm.
So like Jesus maybe not, I don't know if it's like if he had been like a literal sacrifice replacing those, or if it was like just kind of showing like I don't know, I don't want to use the word metaphor, but like what he did was kind of like, would you say it was literally like, replacing those old sacrifices, or was it like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
quite
So
literal, but
so the Bible talks about those sacrifices and how that the sacrifices of those animals were covering mankind's sin. They covered it. It was oh, there's terminology I was going to use for that, but I forgot what it was. But basically, like, it was a temporary covering. The like if you look into what Israel did back then, they would have the regular sacrifices, but then they would have like an annual sacrifice, and people would bring in their animal or whatever they were bringing. And there's different types of sacrifices too. There's bread, grain, and oil sacrifice that you would burn. There's the animal, and there's a ton of different ways, a ton of different sacrifices that they had to follow. Um, and that blood covered their sins. But the Bible talks about Jesus's blood being the final sacrifice, washing away sins. So instead of covering it, instead of being a temporary um, a temporary covering, it was the final washing away for the age of grace, but not yet for the working of mankind through Israel, which Let me put a disclaimer on that because, like I say, there's two ways God deals with man. The way God deals with man through the nation of Israel is stopped right now. There's no such thing as Jew, Greek, or Gentile. We're all on the same level in this age. But like that's where the whole like turn like that's where the whole concept of the mystery comes in, because there was a prophetical clock ticking and you could measure it out with like the 70 weeks of Daniel and everything, and when temples were built and everything. But when uh when the whole mystery came, that like prophetical clock stopped, and now we're in this, we call it a parenthetical time frame of the age of grace that wasn't in prophecy. It was never prophesied. No one ever foresaw it because it was a mystery that the Bible says was hid in God before the foundations of the world. So,
And is that what the mystery is?
well, there's the mystery. We'll get we'll talk about that later because there's there's actually mysteries within the mystery that Paul talks about. It's like
Oh
a
wow.
6 or 7 slice pie thing that has different mysteries, but the mystery is Ephesians 3, and it basically that's how salvation works today, is was completely a mystery. When you look at like Jesus's earthly ministry, his disciples had no idea what he was talking about with his death. They didn't know, they didn't want him to die. They didn't know he was going to die specifically coming up. And even when he was crucified and resurrected, and then his apostles started preaching the gospel of the kingdom, that still wasn't what we preach today. It was completely different, and completely different application. And the crucifixion and everything had a completely different meaning to Israel too. So it's completely different program. We refer to as like the prophecy program and the mystery program, completely different programs. But
Okay.
yeah, that was a it was a good question. Yeah, Jesus's Jesus's sacrifice wasn't just like a symbolic sacrifice. It
Okay.
it had a direct application to how like God sees sin, how it was like an actual payment for sin, and Jesus became sin, like basically embodied on the cross. And like it's like, okay, that's the final that's the final like sin that has to be paid basically for all sins. Sin, like the sin of sins, basically was like embodied in Jesus when he was on the cross. So yeah, the sacrifices basically went away. Though there is a little caveat on that in the future to come, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So,
Faith.
so faith. I was gonna ask if you wanted to like, in conclusion, like,
In conclusion, faith in Christianity um, doesn't just mean like believing. Like you got to have faith, man. You just got to have faith. Like that sounds like blind faith to me. And faith is not blind. Faith, before, it was man's faith that saved him. Now in this age it is Christ's faith that saves us through grace, and we through God's grace he's giving us that faith, and we just have to trust in that.
so
And
would
we
you say the
we literally
trust,
don't have to do anything.
would you say the trust in that is what most people would refer to as faith?
I believe so, yeah. Like I have faith in Jesus. They're referring really to believing and trusting what he did through his faith.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really like, even from like a generic Christian approach, when they say, "Oh, I have faith," it would be more like, it would more properly be translated or defined as a trust in Jesus's faith.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Christianity as a whole, it's like faith, having faith would be believing in what Jesus did on the cross for your sins.
Okay.
and then believing what God, like God will do what he says he will do. Like I have faith in God, I have faith in Jesus. People just throw that out. What does that mean? I think it's really like depends on where that person's coming from with that word faith. Because my circles, we tend to be nitpicky on like terminology from the Bible because
Mm.
like even like ye and or like thy, like the different words like ye and thee are different, have different meanings um grammatically. So like we're pretty nitpicky like by faith or by his faith, like, but when we say generic terms like I have faith in Jesus, that means, I trust and believe in what Jesus did.
Yeah, you still use the popular vernacular,
Yeah,
but
yep,
you
yeah.
you are in a positive sense, I guess, like pedantic about what words mean exactly.
Right. Like even the word Christian, um, that is actually like dispensationally probably more like less correct in this age of grace than it was outside of the age of grace, like biblically speaking. But like that's how picky we can be with like what applies where. So I think that's kind of why I went so like detailed on the definition of faith, is because how I approach the Bible with certain like specific definitions is like it's like pretty dead set. Like you got to
Yeah.
look for by and with or through. Like if that
The
is different, it might
prepositional
have
phrasing completely changes the meaning.
definite articles, prepositions. Like they really do have different. Like they really do change the meaning on things,
Oh yeah.
and that well, like we will have an episode on like scriptures, like religious scriptures,
Sacred texts and stuff. Yeah.
sacred texts. That will be
I mean,
pretty
that could be
interesting.
next episode if you want. I'm really looking forward to that
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it's a really good foundational episode too, like showing where the information we get comes from and
Yeah,
how we relate to it. But
definitely, definitely. Like, how do I relate to my faith? Like, going back to faith, I don't know how to answer that question exactly.
yeah, yeah, I don't know. I may have written it on a whim.
That's that's perfectly fine then.
So we don't have to really pay attention to that one. But
Cool, cool.
all right. So if do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh man, I don't think so. Not at this time.
Okay.
There are so many different ways I want to go, but again, this podcast we do want to be very topic based because I think in any religious discussion you can go down rabbit holes, and I already went down probably three rabbit holes this episode.
Yeah.
Um, but I
I
think it on the topic of rabbit holes though, like we do need to help define what we're saying, or again, it gets lost in translation. Like,
yeah,
oh, let
and
me
I
lay out like why these dispensational like differences matter because the definition matters, like depending on what you're talking about. So like,
yeah, and I think it's kind of hard to like for me it's hard to when planning out this podcast to like think, okay, what episodes should come first,
oh, I know.
because we need to lay like foundational understandings of what we're talking about, because we don't want like the viewers to hear something we say and assume they know what we mean,
Exactly.
because of the vast like doctrinal differences that might come into play. I mean,
Hmm.
just like
Exactly.
with the prepositions, change things, and like if you say something, someone else might completely mistranslate it. Um, which
Exactly.
like, and that's okay if you mistranslate something, because that's what these conversations are about, is like learning, you know, learning, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it does lend itself to being able to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you said faith of Jesus, like, But like I always just thought faith in Jesus, like what's that about? Like I just remembered like one of the verses that I think I wanted to bring up was Romans 3:22 was even the righteousness of God which is by faith of Jesus Christ un, unto all and upon all them that believe, for there is no difference. I think that's talking about the difference between Jew and Greek or Gentile. Um, but it talks about the faith of Jesus Christ. And like I don't think a lot of Christians really realize that there is a difference between our faith and his faith.
Hmm.
So being able to ask those kind of questions out of our rants,
Yeah.
it helps us, it helps people to learn to question and grow and learn more about
Yeah, and it might, it
beliefs
might
and
give
their beliefs, their own
it gives
beliefs.
someone, like an opportunity to expand what they thought they knew about like faith. Like someone may start watching or listening to this who just assumed faith always meant blind faith.
Right.
And now they're like, "Oh wow, there's a different approach.
Yeah,
There's a different
exactly.
meaning."
Yeah, I don't really think there's any place for blind faith in like my beliefs. Like you don't just blindly believe something if we're going to apply that definition like blind faith.
Yeah.
There's always a reason.
And I
You're always
would and I would actually like hazard a guess that not a lot of religions actually use blind faith.
yeah, no kidding.
Like, I think that might be a misconception.
I very much agree. I very much agree because that goes back to understanding why people believe what they believe. And I've been asked before by people like even just like on random subjects or like topics, maybe it's political or maybe it's religious or something. It's like oh they like why did they decide to do this? I just can't wrap my head around that. And it's like, well, I think I know why they did it. I don't agree with it, but I think I can rationalize their decision or their thoughts. It's like how do you know that? It's like I think I just try to put myself into their shoes and like think like why would I think this? It's not to oppose something or it's not just blindly believing it. There is
Yeah.
a reason to why
Yeah.
people do things.
Everyone always has a reason to believe or do something. Like,
Mhm.
even if it might be something you don't agree with, or maybe it's even like obviously based in like a very wrong misunderstanding.
Exactly. Yeah,
But like
exactly.
it's never blind, I don't think.
Yeah. Like most criminals aren't criminals just because they want to be bad. Like they usually have some kind of motivation behind it, gaining something or getting rid of something to better their lives, they think. Gross misunderstanding sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. But but yeah, I think so. Before I get into my stuff, I think we would love to hear from listeners and viewers about
Definitely.
what faith means to them, and I think that this is a good place to plug, you can email us, or
Yes.
probably Facebook message us on our Facebook page or something.
Yeah. So if you guys
Um,
don't know, we have our email is Baptist and Buddhist at gmail.com. Just Baptist and Buddhist, know the. So Baptist and Buddhist at gmail.com. We have a Facebook page called The Baptist and the Buddhist. Go check it out. Like us, comment, share, whatever you want to do. Uh,
like and subscribe.
yeah, you obviously we have YouTube. If you're watching this, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell because subscriptions sometimes don't really reach out to people sometimes. Um,
But yeah,
eh,
we want to hear from you.
yes,
We want
definitely.
to hear your perspective, because this show isn't
Hmm.
just about him and me. Um, it's also about other people of other faiths, and we want to hear what faith means to you.
Yeah, because we do want to. It's unfortunately we don't have a third like triplet or quadruple. quadruplets that are like completely other different religions, or we would be talking about four religions here instead of two.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have a whole open forum at the moment or anything, so definitely let us know. We want to hear, and we can read what you say, what you contact us about. That could further our discussion as well.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Another avenue is to leave a review on whatever podcast uh, app or conglomerate or whatever you're listening to. Definitely leave reviews, comments, or whatever they do on their platforms.
Yeah. 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 If you're enjoying this, if you find something of worth or entertainment or astoundment or bewilderment, let us know.
Disturbed. Maybe you're disturbed.
Maybe you are just completely, utterly shocked. Anyway, so faith, faith.
Yeah, let's see what your point of view is.
I think Aster wants to let everyone know. You're gonna have to
Sounds like it.
you're gonna have to deal with the purring. I'm sorry.
Hey, we're pet friendly.
So faith in Buddhism. So this when you asked this question at the end of the last podcast, I was like, I have no idea. Um, but after some recollection and some organizing, I think I think I'll be able to sufficiently kind of explain what faith might mean uh, in a Buddhist context. Because I think a lot of people, if they know enough about Buddhism, will be surprised there's actually an aspect of faith in Buddhism. Um,
I was kind of wondering, like, is there anything he can like extrapolate on?
yeah, because it's
That just shows my ignorance there. Like, that's why we're having these discussions.
so so the Buddha in Buddhism, we're humongous fans of lists. There's a lot of lists, and it's really I think it plays a huge part. The lists do in organizing all this wealth of information. Um, and so the Buddha lists um, 37 requisites, I guess, of enlightenment.
Wow, that sounds like one of
Um,
my pastor's sermons.
but the thing is, a lot of these requisites are actually the same thing. Like so, you have the Eightfold Path, but then you have the four right efforts, which is right effort, one of the Eightfold Path, one of the folds of the Eightfold Path. Then you have four foundations of mindfulness, which is right mindfulness. Um, and you also have these five faculties. They're called five faculties, sometimes five spiritual faculties, and they're kind of like cardinal virtues to cultivate, I guess, which will then help you along the path to awakening. And the first faculty, there's also there's the five faculties and the five I think they're called spiritual powers, and they're the exact same list. But I think it's the context in which one is used and one's not. But so the very first faculty in this list is what we might call faith. It's a word in Pali. It's sada, and so sada is not is just like how what we were describing is not blind faith. It's not believing in something or like believing in something that you might not be able to explain or prove or something. And a lot of people actually translate this sometimes as like confidence or trust or conviction. I see conviction a lot. And
I like that definition.
yeah, yeah,
Confidence and conviction.
yeah. And trust actually plays a big part in it too once you dive into it. So faith, what like faith in what? confidence in what? In Buddhism, there's no concept of a god or anything. So what should we place our confidence, our faith in? Um and simply it's the confidence or trust or conviction in the path of practice, the path to awakening and the possibility of awakening. We trust that awakening is possible, enlightenment is possible, and and the way the faith is cultivated. I've heard it explained many different ways, uh, but the first way of cultivating this sada is in direct experience, which is a huge part of Buddhist practice, is direct experience. And so this direct experience is like when you apply your practice, you you start to get results. You see results. Not like, oh, if you work out, you'll see results in 4 weeks. But but it's the results of seeing directly the truth, the nature of phenomenon. And I think I covered a little of that in the last one.
Hmm.
Anicca, anatta, and dukkha, the impermanence, not self, and the unsatisfactoriness of conditioned phenomena. And so I think part of the direct experience is like just, just when you start this practice, you can start to get glimpses of these truths. Like, oh, okay, like maybe not even a complete direct like understanding of these truths, but kind of a oh, okay, I get it. And so this direct experience is, oh, okay, this practice is useful for something. It's based in something that we can that we can work with. And so I'm not sure if I'm explaining it like
Is it kind of like
satisfactory.
you gain like the faith or confidence in your what you're practicing because you realize it's working? Is it kind of like that? Or like
Yeah.
you realize it's giving you or taking you somewhere that you maybe you didn't know you were trying to get there, or maybe you were trying to reach to that certain point in like your experience.
Um
Is it kind of like
maybe
that?
maybe but I think it more directly relates to the idea of of I don't know, because a big part of the practice is seeing through our our delusion, our deluded minds into to the direct experience of reality. Like, so we like it's kind of like you you can stop labeling, like you see through the labels you put on things that might not be completely accurate. And in doing so, the delusion that we put on things is of, oh, this is reliable, thus it will bring me happiness and joy. And then like, it turns out not to be reliable, and you are left befuddled. Oh no, this won't this I'm distraught. This thing is not giving me happiness.
So you're
And
putting your faith into something that you shouldn't have been.
yeah, I mean, in a sense, yeah. And seeing through that, um maybe not even seeing through it, like directly seeing through it, but seeing how how it makes sense or something. I mean, there's a difference between like the intellectual knowing and the direct realization of the of the impermanence and not self. But so there's a in short, there's a direct experience that that the sada comes from. It's seeing the practice in working, I guess, in a sense.
Okay.
And from there you can get what's called you can develop sada through what might be inference. You can infer that, okay, because this works, because this maybe because this thing was impermanent or unsatisfactory, I can infer from that, okay, probably everything else that follows um, in the teachings will also work. And so there's there's a great sutta that kind of summarizes the question of how do we know to who to trust, who to believe. um, and it's called the Kalama Sutta, and it's one of the most popular ones and one of the most misinterpreted ones, actually. But in the story, these Kalamas, these I don't know if they're a group of ascetics uh, or or what, but they come to the Buddha and they ask, like, how do we know there are so many people out here teaching these teachings and claiming to know the answer? Like, how can we know for ourselves who to believe? And the Buddha, um, the Buddha first starts out with saying, yes, you should doubt that. Like, you should be questioning this. Um, and I'll probably like just like skim through it and read a little bit about it. Um, and so he lays out like these kind of requisites for what not to believe and what to believe, like what to base your faith on, pretty much. And so I don't misquote it, I'll read a little bit. So he says, do not go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon what is in a scripture, nor upon surmise, nor upon an axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon a bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon the consideration, this contemplative is our teacher. And then he says, when you yourselves know, these things are bad, these things are blamable, these things are censured by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to harm and ill, you abandon them. So what he's basically saying is this direct experience is when you know for certain, like from a direct experiential observation, hey, this thing leads to bad things. This action or this thought leads to harm, leads to suffering. Maybe I shouldn't do that, you know? And he basically says, don't just believe something because someone else has said it, because it's tradition, because it's in a book, like. But he doesn't just say go on your logic, because sometimes our logic is flawed. So he did say, when you pay attention, he says these things, when he says, you know for yourselves, these things are bad, these things are blamable, these things are censured by the wise. So, you can go back and look at what the wise people of your tradition have come to know themselves and how they practice. And So in this same sutta, he kind of, uh, and this is a very common formula in the suttas where one chunk of it will be like a negative approach, and the second chunk of it will be the exact same thing but the positive approach. So he says, he repeats what he says: don't go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing or tradition or rumor or scripture or surmise or axiom, etc., etc. He says, when you know yourselves, when you yourselves know these things are good, these things are not blamable, these things are praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to benefit and happiness, enter on and abide in them. So, oh, this practice, this action, this thought, this intention actually leads to beneficial, good outcomes. And then it's like, okay, this is something worth practicing.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and then the sutta ends on what this commentator says is the Buddhist version of the Pascal's wager, but that's for another story. Or that's for another time. But so in that you can kind of see like the direct experience and the inference. So the direct experience is knowing for yourself, oh, this is an unskillful action. This is a skillful action. Thus, I should abandon them or, you know, abide in them. So that's kind of the direct experience part of the sada. The other part is, oh, the wise praise this like action, like the wise censure this action, like, okay, they say no, don't do that, or they say yes, do that. Um and the wise being, I'm in this context probably, other people who have undertaken the path or other enlightened people or something, within the Dhamma of the Buddha. Um, so it's almost, I get this feeling of like a weird level of compare and contrast, almost like, oh, it's like, is this a good thing to practice? Is this an actual useful like practice? And then you see, oh well, okay, like the Buddha, you know, he teaches it, he practices it himself, and has gained enlightenment from it, and so did all these other members of the sangha, the, the group of practitioners, and also, so I also wanted to touch on like that that the sada is, of course, only one of five faculties. So it's not like the end all be all, like where you should rest your, I don't know, trust or your focus on the practice or anything.
Hmm.
It's one aspect. And it actually has a very specific purpose in the path of practice, which is to overcome doubt, which is one of the fetters that keep you tied to samsara.
Hmm.
And once you can overcome that fetter, break from those bonds, you are, you're free to move on. You aren't tied down. But doubt is usually said to be one of the most difficult fetters to overcome. Um, but that's the role that sada plays in the five faculties, is overcoming doubt. And
Hmm.
it's this the sada, the confidence, this faith can only take us so far. You even if it wasn't like, even if it was a faith through direct experience or something. It's kind of through direct experience that the path to awakening is attained. Um,
Hmm.
and I was actually listening to some to a Dharma talk either today or yesterday, and they were actually talking about in Buddhism, at least in early Buddhism, there's like the enlightened people, the people who've gained enlightenment, reached awakening, and they're called arahants, and then there's like the phase before that, which is called the stream enterers, and there's three different levels. There's the stream enterers themselves who have entered the stream, and it is inevitable they will, you know, be awakened. Like they have jumped in the stream and there's no getting out of it. It's just a matter of time. And I think there's like a specific number, like classically defined as like, oh, within 7 lifetimes or something. Um, but like once you're a stream enterer, you have entered the stream, and there's just like water running down a hill. There's no stopping it. Um,
Hmm.
and it and the other ones is like there's a once returner and a non-returner. Once returner being that they will only have to be reborn one more time before reaching enlightenment, and
Hmm.
non-returner. But what why I bring this up is that they were talking about the stream enterers. Like when you reach that level, like you will have complete and utter sada in the idea of enlightenment. Like, oh yes, like this is, like there is no doubt in my mind this is possible. Like I can see it clearly. The path is ahead of me. Like all doubts of the ideas, the possibility of being enlightened are removed. And they also say like you have faith and confidence in the Buddha's enlightenment as well. Like yes, he was awakened, and the the practice he teaches is like will take me there too. So, and I don't know if I have any more of than that.
Hmm. Well, from what you described, that was a kind of a fresh angle on faith.
Yeah, it because it
Definitely.
like hinges a lot on like direct experience,
Right, yeah.
which I think is a
Definitely
little
gives
different.
me more insight on like how that all works. Because to me, like, r- like the listeners and viewers probably don't realize, but like we've we're twins, we're best friends, we talk probably daily, at least by chatting or texting each other. We live 800 miles away. We have for almost 10 years now. But we really don't get a lot of in-depth discussion on our beliefs like this. So like a lot of this stuff is like brand new to me.
Yeah,
And I'm sure a lot of what I say is brand new to you too. So it really does open up a lot of like, oh wow, I never knew that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is like unexplored territory for the both of us.
Oh yeah,
So what we
definitely.
say is like new to
Yeah,
each other.
we haven't pre-discussed this stuff or anything.
No, yeah, that's like the one of the big things is that like I mean there's the general topic, but like we don't sit there and discuss, okay, what are we gonna say, you know?
Yeah,
Like
these conversations are pretty organic. There might not be a lot of back and forth sometimes, but um, just listening is like a huge part of these conversations. I mean, conversations go both ways, so
yeah. Yeah.
definitely with even with our next episode, which I'm guessing is going to be um religious texts.
Yeah.
Um, that's gonna be a pretty. I'm very curious on your side, and I'm really excited to kind of open the floodgates on my side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this to me, like doing this, I'm sure you probably get the same thing, but like giving ourselves a topic and then like, okay, like what am I gonna say? Like it allows me to like delve into stuff deeper and like,
Hmm.
make sense of it. And
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, I've taught this stuff like on from my side before for a long time, like on some specific topics, especially like I taught for like 2 years in a row, and teaching it, just teaching it helps you learn. That's like the best way to learn is to teach because you got to learn the material before other people learn. And I've definitely learned that. I'll probably keep learning. I mean, I'm never going to stop learning, but with this podcast, I'm probably going to learn some stuff on the way from my perspective too. So just to be
yeah.
able to get the point across in a hour and a half window, like what am I going to say just to get the basics out there? Because
Yeah, I
you could
mean,
spend years in a class or something on some of these topics, but we want to just, again, like we said earlier, lay the foundation kind of,
yeah.
especially on these early episodes, the foundational episodes.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like being if I'm being honest, like yeah, I took like a sheet of notes and I felt, yeah, this is really nicely structured, and then I feel like I just like ramble and
Yeah, me
like,
too.
wait, what am I saying? Like, and it's really interesting. Like I even skipped over a part that I wanted to touch on.
I even as you spoke, and I'm just going to say this real quick. I'm not going to let this drag on too much longer. But like when you said you asked a good question, like faith in who, it's like that's a great question. And I didn't really explain like what the faith of Jesus was, but like Jesus had faith in God the Father in what he said he was going to do. And you could see all throughout even his time on earth, like he will not question, but echo back to God the Father in this weird relationship of the Trinity, and he has faith in God the Father. And um, it's not like we can't have faith; we can be faithful in this day and age, but like relying on the faith of Jesus is like the pinnacle of our salvation in this day and age. So, with the whole topic of faith, I guess I kind of left that out, was that like we can be like Christians can be faithful and have faith too. It's just not what we rely on.
Hmm.
But you saying that brought up that in my mind, like you asking that question, like faith in who. It's like, oh yeah, that's a good question to ask.
And I mean, what you just said about like faith is not what you were like, it's not the thing you rely on. Um, I think that's, is that what you said? Something like
Yeah,
it's not
for
the,
us, like our faith is not what we rely on. It's the faith that Jesus had and
mm,
has, because he's faithful. But we can still be faithful and have faith.
yeah,
Um,
I like that because it kind of like in Buddhism, like faith isn't like the thing we rely on, even though it's like you can have faith, you can have sada, but like, and I'm gonna go back to the direct experience thing because something I left out is that the Buddha called the Dhamma, his teachings, he described it as this word ehipassiko, which is usually described as come and see for yourselves. So he invites people to, he kind of urges the practitioners to investigate and to test these teachings of his. And um and I mean,
Man, this
through
could be
that
a topic
investigation,
on itself.
I know. And through that ehipassiko, this come and see for yourselves quality of the Dhamma, like you can see how faith through direct experience comes up, but like you can also see that it is the direct experience itself that is the most useful and beneficial.
Hmm.
And
Hey,
it kind of
off the
ties into
record.
with the five faculties as well, like the energy, like persistence and energy and mindfulness and discernment and concentration. Um, they all kind of like tie into the idea of direct experience.
That yeah, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I think it really helped me kind of think it through on my end, and
And yeah,
definitely
same.
learned from you too. So
Likewise.
next, I think that it's a good springboard to go into the next topic. I guess it kind of not really directly a springboard, but like the next topic is one of my favorite topics. A topic that I've probably taught on substantial amount um, from my end with scripture and religious texts. So I'm excited to delve into that next time.
Oh yeah. I That's gonna be such a fun episode.
Yes, it will be. And for the viewers, like we might have some like I know I'll have like some stuff to hold. So
Oh
definitely
yeah, me too.
get a hold of the video if you're listening. See some cool stuff. But yeah, I think you know if you have questions or comments, again, email us baptistandbuddhist@gmail.com.
And
Go to the
tell us
Facebook
what
page.
faith means to you, you know?
Yes, tell us what faith means to you. And also, before the next episode drops, talk about some religious texts. Send us questions about that, so maybe we can um, address that later
Yeah.
on. Probably not on the actual episode because we'll probably not release that before you get a chance to contact us. But we can
Hmm,
always follow up, and it's
we
always
might
going to be.
actually.
I mean, yeah, maybe. Yeah, you never know, actually.
If you have questions for us about our respective texts, shoot.
Yeah, yeah. And though we're not really harboring a debate or anything, like if you have challenges that you want to counter us with, definitely hit us up.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, A, I appreciate you opening this discussion up, and I cannot wait for the next one.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that's we're gonna call it a night. So this has been the Baptist
And the Buddhist
with Mark.
and Brian.
So until next time, see you guys later.
See you
Thanks for
later.
viewing and listening.
Thank you.